The Batman Arkham series is one of those game series that I think will go down in history books as being one of the definitive versions of these characters. Now, it got so many people into Batman, it got so many people into the Batman mythos. It kind of did for video games what a movie like The Dark Knight did for cinema, where even though there were Batman games before the Arkham series, just like there were Batman movies before The Dark Knight, it was so accessible, so palatable, and so well marketed that it hit this mass audience, mainstream, extravaganza, absolute bonanza, lots of anzas that brought all these people in. And it's interesting because it all was different than what came before in many ways. You know, we've talked about things like free flow combat, we've talked about some of the detective aspects, all these things, right? Something I wanted to mention is actually from a little blurb from Mark Hamill, voice of the Joker, which was shared last year in October of 2023. I didn't actually talk about it at the time because I didn't see it, and it's something that I knew about in terms of the DCAU Batman the Animated Series, all these versions of the characters that had been kind of prominent in the 90s that had also connected with younger audiences and mainstream audiences, but it's something that I think a lot of people don't really think about, and that's what actually allowed the Arkham series, and especially Joker himself, to be so much different than he had appeared on TV screens before in something like Batman the Animated Series in the old DCAU. And a lot of it comes down to something as simple as TV censorship. Now, before we hop a little further into the video, if you do enjoy it, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content, let us know what you think in the comments down below. We also do have our Let's Play channel, Degenerate Plays, where we've been playing through games. We're actually playing through Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League right now, getting close to the end, thankfully. Also do have new resin products over on cosmobunny.shop, which I will show you more at the end of the video. Now, today's video will be a little shorter because it's not actually a super in-depth topic, but it is something that I think a lot of people overlook, and it's the idea of TV censorship. Something that has applied to video games in the past in, a different way in video game censorship, especially when you had the formation of the ESRB. You had all of these lawyers running around trying to file lawsuits, trying to say that video games kill people, that they encouraged school pew-pewings and violence, and that, kids wouldn't be doing these things if it weren't for video games, right? Like, video games had become a scapegoat, especially around the time of Mortal Kombat 2, when you were kind of seeing this, too much violence type thing, right? Well, that's really been backed off from, I would say, in the last couple of decades. But for a little while, it was a big deal, way before the Batman Arkham series. In a similar way, TV censorship was a huge deal in something like the early to mid-90s. Of course, when something like Batman the Animated Series was going full speed ahead and actually kind of connecting with the hearts and minds of young and old fans alike on TV and introducing them to the characters of Batman. Now, if you don't know about censorship in TV, you don't really need to look further than something like Spider-Man the Animated Series. There were a lot of very odd rules put on a series like that. For example, characters weren't allowed to say die because it was on TV and it was directed at children, essentially. They weren't allowed to show blood unless it was in a test tube, essentially. They weren't allowed to show real guns most of the time, so characters used laser guns, something that I'm sure you noticed a lot of characters use in the DCAU with Batman and other shows. So there were a lot of very nitpicky, fine lines that writers had to walk. Even deaths were often shown off screen in the DCAU, or they were panned away from. Not always, especially not later on, but earlier on in something like Batman the Animated Series, think about Dick Grayson's parents dying. It had to pan away from that to show the shot of his face reacting to the fall at the circus. There were a lot of things like this that dictated what could and could not be done. And the reason this kind of came to my attention was because I was looking back through some old statements, and in October of 2023, Mark Hamill actually directly referenced this when talking about Batman, the animated series in the DCAU, versus the take that he got to do in Arkham of this character, saying 12 years and a day ago today, freed from the constraints of television's standards and practices department, TV censors, and aimed at a more mature audience, the Arkham trilogy was dark, gritty, and extremely violent. This was a whole new Joker for me. And something that I find interesting about this is that it is so simple, right? Like, I think it's something a lot of people overlook, is the fact that TV censorship can control and shape and morph what you're able to do on a television. For example, you know, something like Joker not being able to directly murder people a lot of the times in the early DCAU, right? But you were able to see his victims with his Joker laughing gas. They were like convulsing off screen, dying. A lot of times they were saved, but a lot of times it was also open to interpretation. Like, they wouldn't actually tell you if someone died or was saved or if they just died from Joker laughing gas. And then later on, of course, as well in the new animated series, and as well in things like Justice League and Unlimited, there was more death. There was more talking about people actually dying. So it wasn't that people couldn't die in this universe, it was that you had to be very slick and creative about how you did it. Sometimes that made for better storytelling, but sometimes it directly limited what they were able to do, which is why storylines like Jason Todd were obviously saved for way later in the pages of DCAU comic books and not actually told on screen. They pretty much skipped straight to Tim Drake. Batman Arkham didn't really have to deal with any of this. Now, I don't think Batman Arkham really ever took it to an insane, extreme, edgy, violent place where it's like, oh wow, they really crossed the line here. They went too far. This is not creative. Like, they really needed those censorship practices to hone in what they were able to do and boost their creativity. They showed with the Arkham series that you could kind of have both. You could have this very creative storytelling, but you could also show the violence. Say what you will about Arkham Knight. I know a lot of people, it's, you know, like, it's debated, is it their favorite, is it their least favorite, whatever it is for you. I do think it's interesting that you can have moments like the flashback to events of The Killing Joke, where you have Joker kick in the door, essentially, you know, and knock down Barbara and shoot her. You can have moments like that, but they don't have to be censored. You know, you can have moments where you see the torture of Jason Todd, and they don't have to be censored. Things like that led to a Joker that was much more violent, much more unhinged, uncontrollable, and almost a force of nature in a lot of ways. And we saw elements of that Joker absolutely in the DCAU, especially in things like Justice League and Unlimited in his few appearances, or something like the new Batman Adventures. We did get to see that. And we even saw, you know, glimpses of a ruthless Joker in the early DCAU. I do think it is worth noting that something so simple, like TV censorship, is what caused this change in direction. In a closing note on this, it's fascinating to me that in a time where essentially on TV in Japan, they were showing things like characters with a hole blown in their chest in anime like Dragon Ball Z. In America, we were panning away from two people falling off of tightropes because it was too violent for children. It's just so interesting how these different standards and practices were so different in different countries, different parts of the world, but they did actually kind of shape and, I would say, I don't know, constrain, but sometimes even enhance storytelling in very odd ways. I'd love to take a look at censorship in the DCAU in the future, because I do want to make more videos about the DCAU. I'm actually getting back right now into watching Batman the Animated Series more, so let me know if you want to see something like that. But I did think this was very interesting, even though it's a very short snippet from Mark Hamill. It's something I think a lot of people overlook, but it does have a massive impact on storytelling. If you enjoyed today's video, you want to support this channel, you could leave a like, subscribe, let me know what you think in the comments down below. We do have a Patreon, we have channel memberships, things like that, sharing the video with a friend. It all helps a lot in a very uncertain, unstable YouTube landscape. We also do have new resin products on our store, cosmobunny.shop. This is a store where we actually take things like manga and comic books, no, not mint condition ones, okay, we're not psychopaths, ones that are not able to be sold in stores that are damaged. We take them, and what we do is we actually turn them into coasters, keychains. We use that comic book paper to make recycled, repurposed, transformative pieces of art for your home, and then we actually recycle the rest into the real recycling. Then what we do as well is we use recycled packing materials to send this out to you, so we try and make this as green of a process and business as we can, and we try and make it affordable as well, which is why we have our discount code DJAY123 for 10% off your first order, and that code is also our Fortnite Supporter Creator code if you want to help support this channel. We appreciate you very much, have a fantastic day, and as always everyone, stay shui.